Chris, I hope you've had a great week. Welcome into the game in T-Town.
I've had a great week breaking down a lot of tape around college and the NFL. It's been an interesting week as we get deeper and deeper into the season.
Yeah, no doubt. And, I mean, we're starting to learn a lot about this football team in Tuscaloosa. They went to Vanderbilt and just annihilated the Vanderbilt Commodores.
Yeah, it was one of the more impressive performances. Well, I don't know that I've seen a more impressive performance this year in college football. In fact, I know I haven't. I think this Vanderbilt team's a pretty good team, and I'm very curious to see how they respond off of this loss. That's maybe the more curious thing, but domination, I don't think really does it justice. They completely controlled this game in every aspect. It was like playing an FCS team and playing a lot of young guys, and just very, very impressive performance by the Tide, just rolling in all aspects.
What'd you see from the offensive identity that we think is being formed here in Tuscaloosa under Brian Dable?
Well, I mean, this was such a dominating performance that, I thought that controlling the line of scrimmage was the first thing that jumps out at you. Second, the ability to be able to make plays whenever they needed to and call upon it. It was about as clean a performance as I've seen them play. And the offensive identity as it's coming into fold is very much what we've talked about and which we touched on last week. They're going to be a team that's built on the downhill run, and they're going to create opportunities in the passing game with the run-pass options. To get Tua in the game was intriguing in that he certainly gives them an ability to throw the football a little more. He keeps his eyes downfield more when he's scrambling and moving, whereas Jalen is more of a one-read and a take-off and run guy. He's a bigger run threat in terms of a design runner or as a take-off runner, whereas Tua is more of a guy that can scramble. Throw to run versus throw to throw is the way I would describe him. But, it is intriguing how they're, getting to play him some and how they might build a package for him and how they might have to go to him or may choose to go to him if need be to get more out of the passing game. I don't know how that's going to evolve as I study it and I look at it. I just don't see anybody, Ryan, really challenging this team in conference. I like this Georgia team. And I think, potentially, we'll see, jumping the gun here, but potentially in the conference championship game, that would be the best opponent. But I still think we're talking about a gap, and I'm not quite sure that I have seen teams consistently around the country as I study them that would have a lot of success against this Alabama team. So I think this team is, while not perfect, and the challenge is to always get better from where you are to where I think you can be. This team, the consistency of which it plays is on a different level. You don't see that out of Clemson. You don't see the consistency out of Clemson or USC or Penn State. The consistent dominance that Alabama shows me on tape is just a little bit different than what I'm seeing from anyone else.
Let me ask you about the approach that you have to get your players back down to ground earth, because we do a fan-friendly program where we have phone calls, and everybody's still talking about that Vanderbilt win was impressive. We've had a hard time sort of shifting our emotions to Ole Miss. How much trouble do you think Nick Saban will getting these guys back down to ground earth and be able to coach them to go up against a different typing looking team like Ole Miss?
Of all the things that Nick Saban does, that's the thing he does best. He doesn't allow everything. Every week's a new season. It's a new identity. It's you've done nothing. It's what you're about to do this week that matters. It's easy for fans to continue to look at it because as fans, they respond to games on Saturday, and all they have to talk about between Saturdays are the game that was played and a little bit towards what we think is going to happen next week. But as a coach, it's pretty easy because once you get that film and you look at it and you study it, what you have to focus on is what can we do better and what do we have to do a little bit differently this week to play this coming opponent. So it's a little bit easier to put it behind you as a team, as a coach, and as players. Now, for young players, it is a problem getting up week in and week out. We've seen this happen a lot. I don't think there's any doubt that Georgia is better than Mississippi State, but are they 31-3 better? I don't know. I think that Mississippi State couldn't handle prosperity, and I think handling a bad loss or a bad performance, handling a good performance is the key to being, I think, great. That's the thing that I think that Nick Saban does the best of anybody. Of all the things he does best, that's the thing that's most impressive is how he can get his guys to focus. There's no doubt that they weren't really all that happy. They didn't think they played very well against Colorado State, giving up some points late and whatnot. And I think that, along with, maybe Vanderbilt talking about how they wanted Bama, I think contributed to even a sharper edge for Bama. Okay, that challenge is going to be up there this week that, you were great and you were sharp last week. Kind of hard to duplicate it as effectively as they did against Vanderbilt this week, but that's the challenge. What can you do? You're going to face a different style of team, a team that does things a little differently. I still think it's going to be tough for Ole Miss to handle Alabama's run game. I think that's where the difference is, but you've got some challenges a little bit with big-time receivers that are going to challenge you more in that aspect of the game. So I think you have to create a little bit of a game within the game. This team's going to provide a different look, different challenges, and, you may have done what you did last week, but can you do this? How well can you do it? We'll be grading you on doing it. That's how you have to kind of get that challenge, so to speak, and dangle that carrot out in front of them to do something a little bit better, a little bit more impressive. And it may not mean a whole lot to fans, but as coaches, you want to be able to see that and see that improvement on a day-in, day-out basis.
Chris, let me go back to number 32, Rashaan Evans, and number 33, Anthony Jennings, back for Alabama on the defensive side of the football. Did you see a different style or maybe the way that Jeremy Pruitt called that game based on getting a couple of his stars back?
Not really. I thought that I think they're a little bit more comfortable, obviously, with having guys that can do a little bit more, that are a little bit more experienced, but a lot of what they did, in terms of their coverage was very similar. I thought they just played it a little bit better. But in terms of what they called, not a whole lot. Maybe a little bit more adjustments and checks. But other than that, no, I thought it was pretty sound and pretty much true to form.
When we go back to Alabama's sort of approach, when you look at this stable of backs, how do you get – because we watched another freshman and another freshman, and I don't know if you watched the TV broadcast, they kept talking about, well, hey, there's another freshman. And you look at Brian Robinson, from right here in Hillcrest, this guy looks good as well. But how do they keep all these guys happy? Let me just simply ask that question. There is a lot of stable of great backs in that backfield.
Well, I don't know. A lot of the keeping them happy, I think what you've got to challenge all of those guys is, look, you've got your opportunity here. We'll play guys. We normally have a feature back, but we will play a couple of guys regularly, and we'll keep fresh guys in. It's your opportunity, and it's up to you to determine how many reps that you will earn in that starting group. And then also, by the way, you're going to have your time. We need to remind everybody that when you're talking about a Harris and Scarborough, we're talking about juniors. You get into the guys like Harris, a freshman, sophomore. Well, I think all these guys know that their time will come if they continue to do things the way they're told. I think that's part of what they do in recruiting. I think if you come here, these kids know that they're going into a very talent-laden group at every position, but certainly in this case, as we're discussing the backs, you kind of know how it's going to play. You can play this out, every year and how it's switched from one, duo to another duo to another to another to another, and I think that's how you do it. That your time will come, you continue to work, and not everybody succeeds in doing that, and they normally fall by the wayside. But the fact that they've got so many guys is impressive, but it's also become pretty predictable. They will get guys in games. I think they've been able to get them in to see more action, and certainly last week than I think that anybody could have anticipated. I don't know. I thought that game might have been a 31-10, 31-13 type of game, not 59-0. So they were able to get a lot more work to a lot younger guys. But you've got a good group up front. They teach that running game very well, and they've got backs that can do it, that can bring the hammer, that can bring the explosiveness. And so, I think that they can throw in a lot of guys there that eventually are going to be real factors. Now, the veteran guys are a little bit more experienced hitting the hole, reading blocks, picking up as protectors, picking up blitzes, and but the younger guys are no shortage in terms of ability and potential.
Damien Harris is a guy that I don't know if he gets enough credit in this backfield. He's averaging a full yard more than what he did per touch as he did last year. I know it's just 4 games in. He's the leading guy when we talk about touchdowns. When you talk about yards per game, it's Jalen Hurts. But when you go to the backs, it's Damien Harris. Do you see something that he's added to his game? He's certainly bulked up a lot, but Damien Harris is taking on that number 1 lead back role.
Well, I think his vision, and vision is something that, while it is innate to some degree, it is aided greatly by your experience and understanding of blocking schemes and understanding how to work off blocks. That has become it's an improvement in his game, and he's gotten better and better, as most backs do, and that's why people say, if you can run, you can start as a freshman. Well, you can, but backs do get better like any other position in terms of their ability to understand blocking schemes and understanding where to hit the hole and the timing. So that's gotten better. He has gotten stronger. I think he's not only get great production, but he's also done a pretty nice job of getting both what I call avoiding yards and after contact yards. So his ability to be his own blocker when he needs to has been really, really effective. I agree with you. I think he's an outstanding back. When you have so many of them and they've been so successful, it's easy to kind of say, that you lose sight of the fact that the greatness of the individual. I mean, if you look at, for example, a Saquon Barkley, who's as good as the back I've seen in quite some time in college football, they've got good backs there. But at Alabama, it's more about the cluster of guys that they have and how they are reminiscent to some degree of others that have been there in the past and other guys currently on the team, that I think it kind of diminishes, in the eyes of some, the value of any singular one.
Let me ask you about Ole Miss's defense. A lot has been said about their offensive attack under Shea Patterson. I think we'll cover that. But let me ask you defensively. This team is right now ranked 59th in the country. They played 2 smaller teams and maybe a mid-tier Pac-12 team that beat them, and they're already at number 60 right now in total defense. Not looking good for the Rebels so far. No, they're really struggling on that side of the ball, and that's where they've taken a step back. When they had a nice little run, their defense was very aggressive, and they forced turnovers, and they stole an extra possession a game, if not 2, for their offense, and that played out very well for them. They rallied to the football, played the run with numbers, and were fairly effective. They just don't have the type of playmakers on defense. They're a little small. I mean, Haynes is a smaller guy. Evans is a smaller guy at end. They certainly got, the big guys in Coatney and Benito Jones, but they're not explosive. They're not great at setting the edge in the run game, and so I think you can attack them there. Their strength is obviously still on offense and their receivers. The receivers are very good. You've got to really be able to stay on top of their guys. They can throw the football very effectively, and Patterson is very capable. But other than outscoring you and maybe getting some breaks on special teams and somehow coming out ahead in the turnover margin, they're a little bit behind the 8 ball on defense. They are, I think, going to get exposed more and more in SEC play. We're talking to Chris Landry. LandryFootball.com is the report that you hear weekly here. It's a very unique perspective. We talk about scouting the opposition. We talk about recapping the game. Chris looks at it from a different perspective. When you talk about it, he's been a scout, he's been a coach, he's been an administrator. LandryFootball.com. For less than a magazine subscription, you can get that same inside information that college coaches and NFL coaches are able to receive. It's LandryFootball.com. As we move forward, Chris, let me go to the SEC. When you look around the league, give me a couple of teams that really grab your attention in the Southeastern Conference.
The team that impresses me the most is Georgia, and I want to see them going forward, but they're just getting better and better on defense. They're very athletic. They play with good eye discipline in the back end, and thought they defended Mississippi State very well, and I think Sam Pittman's doing a very good job coaching up that offensive line. Fromm is protecting the football. They're the the most complete team, second most complete team amongst the rest of the SEC. Everyone else got some flaws, and I think in a lot of cases serious flaws. I'm not seeing any consistency or an impressive play by anyone. We saw Mississippi State play well 2 weeks ago, not so much this past week. I still got questions about Auburn's offense. We'll see how that develops. I like their defense. Not impressed by Tennessee's offense at all. A&M, worry about their defense. Arkansas, worry about them on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I really think there's a bigger gap between Alabama and the rest of the league than we've seen in quite some time. I mean, it's one of the reasons why Alabama's now won the 49th. That was the 49th win in the last 54 games in the SEC for Alabama. So I think the gap is widening, and as I said in the last segment, that outside of Georgia in the potential SEC championship game, I don't know that I see anybody really challenging this team, and it would really depend upon Alabama playing poorly to not even win. I think every one of these games that they play is a double-digit win. I don't see anybody really playing them all that well enough to cause a real threat to upsetting them. And again, could be proven wrong on that because you never know what can happen on a given day. Play poorly, put the ball on the ground, but knowing how they play, knowing how they prepare, and how they match up, I just don't see these teams nearly the threat. Now, I will say this. I think the conference outside of Missouri, which is they're awful, everybody is dangerous. They can beat a lot of people, but I just don't see a really good national playoff caliber team in this conference outside of Alabama. The one possible exception that Georgia could play their way into it. And to be honest with you, I don't know that I can say nationally that I see a team that would match up all that well. Clemson's best game, Oklahoma's best game, might be able to cause some problems, but I don't really see a team that matches up all that well with Alabama nationally. So I see them a little bit differently maybe than some people that I just don't see. It's not that they're not beatable. I just don't see a team right now that's ready for that challenge.
Yeah, going back here to Auburn for a couple of minutes, I know we asked you last week, and we've got a quote that's a promo that promotes our segment here that we ask you about Auburn's offense. In this state, they believe that they fixed their problems against Missouri and Mercer. Sounds like you're not buying it.
Well, I need to see more. I think they played better, but again, it was against Mercer and it was against Missouri, which is offense is so bad. So I think we're going to find out. I think we're going to find out, starting this week against Mississippi State. I think we see that there, and we got LSU in a couple of weeks, which I think LSU's really an average team right now. I think we can start to say that. I'm not ready to say it. No, I'm not ready to say it yet. I don't think they've fixed the problems. I just want to. I think they've improved it. But I want to see how much of that is the level of competition in which they've done it against.
Let me go outside of the conference. Who grabs your attention?
Well, as I said, when they play their best football, Clemson's pretty good. But I saw them play against Boston College, and they played very poorly. I mean, that was a 7-7 game through 3.5 quarters, and it was basically a 14-7 game. Oklahoma let Baylor in the game the entire game. Penn State is very talented, did not finish very well in the red zone against Iowa. USC makes a lot of mistakes, but when they play well, they're very good. Washington is very well coached, very good team, very well may be capable of winning the Pac-12 again, but I don't think they match up athletically with, say, an Alabama or Clemson. We touched on Georgia a little bit. I think Michigan is still trying to fix things on offense and are not there yet. Very impressed with what TCU did matching patterns against Oklahoma State. Wisconsin, may be a bigger threat in the Big Ten than I gave them credit for. Hornibrook is playing well at quarterback, but we're talking about a typical Wisconsin, well-coached, fundamental, physical, but not great playmakers. Ohio State is kind of, their schedule slipped a little bit, and I don't know that they fixed their offense enough. I mean, we're getting on in the teams that are severely flawed now, and that's why I said right now, and that's all I can go on is that's how I see some of these teams, and I see some potential in Penn State. I see some potential in Oklahoma, some potential in Clemson, some potential in USC, but the consistency, I don't see a team that could, at this point, do the damage nationally in the playoffs. And then that's it. I mean, if it's not them, it's going to have to be someone else, and I don't really have the answers right now because I don't see anybody that's playing at that level.
Let me circle back to the LSU Tigers that you know a lot about. What are you seeing in this football team? Are they still having some major problems? What do you see in the Baton Rouge team?
Not very good on the offensive line. Got problems blocking up front. They're thin at defensive tackle. I think people have assumed that they've got great talent because right now LSU has more players in the NFL than anybody. They're just not as typically as deep and as talented as they have been. I think they're a little undisciplined in their play. I think that's been a hallmark of some Ed Orgeron teams where he's been. And so I don't see them holding up. I know that people will say, they always play Alabama well. Well, they've had better teams too. I don't see them holding up against an Alabama. I think that for LSU, if they get by Troy this week, which I think they'll win the game, but Florida, Auburn, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Tennessee, A&M, those 6 games, I could go, all 6 of those games could go either way, which is going to be intriguing because I think LSU is amongst those teams that are very flawed, and particularly as it relates to the offensive and defensive line play. They're not a good passing attack yet, and while everyone talked about their offense and they're going to be dynamic and do this, you can't. It's not about play calling, and it's not about formations, and it's not about motions. It all starts with the play up front, and right now they're just not playing very well, and there's not a lot of answers on this roster, at least for this year. I think that they're maybe an 8-4 type of team, 7-5. They're in that range.
When I go back here just for a couple of seconds with Alabama and Ole Miss, Vegas has this at 27.5 points. I mean, that's a large game for SEC. What do you see? I mean, is that enough points? What do you think?
You know how that works.
Sure.
The Vegas line is about what they perceive the betting public's going to see it as, not necessarily how much better. But can I see Alabama beating Ole Miss by 30 points? I absolutely can. Now, whether they do it or not really depends upon how sound they play. They play like they did against Vanderbilt, where they're hitting on all cylinders. There's no question. Now, they'll have to play a little bit differently because, as we described, Ole Miss is a little bit of a different type of makeup. But I absolutely can see it. What I really see more is their ability to be able to control the line of scrimmage against Ole Miss's defense. Now, they may give up because I think Ole Miss is capable of making more explosive plays to where maybe it'll be a little closer, where Ole Miss will make a couple plays and maybe sustain a little more and maybe stay in the game a little longer, or Vanderbilt never got in the game. So I think the game could be a little different, but I could absolutely. In fact, I'd be very surprised if Alabama doesn't win this by at least 20 points. I think it's a 17-20 point game, and I'm being conservative there. I think they're that much better than Ole Miss.
Chris, final question. I heard something last week on Coach Saban's show that I want to bring up to you because you know him the way that you do. You've worked with Coach Saban a couple different stops, and I want to ask you. It was about special teams, and he said, I jump down my coaches all the time when I ask about a star player coming over to the special teams. He didn't ask too many questions, but when he says, we need this guy to play on this special teams, he uses a lot of his best players. The starting running back is on special teams. And he told them, one of the players opposed, or one of the coaches opposed, he said, so you mean the special teams is not as important as any other play? He treats it as very, very important. We've seen some shuffles today on that special teams unit. I'm just curious, can you help us understand that a little bit?
I never could understand why people look at special teams as that third of the game that's least important. Everyone talks about offense and defense, and they talk about the kicker, maybe the punter. They talk nothing about protections. the returns, the importance of that. It has a direct line to how you play offense and defense, your special teams. I absolutely, at the college level, I want my best players to play on special teams. I think particularly young players that are trying to work their way up or that are motivated, it's a way for them to work their way into the lineup on offense and defense. People can tell you maybe who their starting defensive tackles are, but ask them who the L3 and L4 are. They have no idea what you're talking about. They don't pay attention to it. Therefore, they don't think of it as important. It's only important to them when you have breakdowns and you're giving up big plays or you're making big plays. It is essential. If you study football, the keys to winning football games at both the college and NFL level, defense, special teams, and offense in that order. It is that important. And if it's that important, why aren't you playing your best players on it? No, I mean, you don't want your star quarterback going down covering kicks if he's not an athletic guy. He's a pocket passer. That's not prudent. But you want your best players. Why not have your most athletic guys being able to rush and cover? That's extremely important. And quite frankly, it's where you could lose a game. If you're a dominant team, what's one way that a team could come in and maybe outplay you? Special teams. They get a return. They cause a fumble. You have a breakdown. All of a sudden, your defense is playing well, but now you're backed up 2 or 3 times in a game because you're backed up in your red zone because you turned the football over on special teams. That's critical. And so I absolutely think that that is the right philosophy. And, you know, I know it's something that a lot of coaches that have come up on the defensive side of the ball, they respect special teams a little bit more, and it has a problem. I used to deal this a lot with talking with some coaches, and I know, for example, like Mike Martz always got frustrated with, you know, he kept everything for that offense, so he wanted as many of those receivers, and they had no tight ends. They kept less linebackers. Well, of course, they couldn't cover anybody. They couldn't cover kicks, and you know, but their idea was they were going to outscore people. Well, I think championship teams are teams that play great defense, that can run the football, and are dominant on special teams. So why wouldn't you play your best players on special teams? The whole thing, they might get hurt. They might get hurt, too. You wouldn't say, well, I don't want to play my best quarterback at, because he might get hurt. Of course you do. You know, you can get hurt on any play. I don't see the difference, and it is something that boggles the mind when people say, well, maybe play them on special teams, but we want to save them. No, I don't agree with that. I agree with his philosophy, and I know Bill Belichick does as well, and we kind of grew up under the same system.
We are talking right now, LandryFootball.com, Chris Landry, LandryFootball.com, or the report that you hear. You could talk about it right now. LandryFootball.com is the website where you just a little less, $99, and you give it $50 to the hurricane victims in a couple different spots in Texas and Florida. Great way to go in. I mean, this is like peanuts, man, for the content that you guys are able to provide. Talk about LandryFootball.com.
Well, that's what we do. We take you inside the film room. We break down the college game, the pro game. We explain the X's and O's, the personnel, who's playing well. So we'll break down, for example, take the Alabama inside the film room. We'll break down the game from last week, and we'll talk about not only how the draft prospects graded out, but other players on the team, the young players, how the team is playing, some of the feelings inside their coaching staff about what they're working on. We take you inside all of that and get you prepared for next week's game, and we do it with everybody really, all the Power 5 schools and a few others. San Diego State's having a good year. South Florida, we're deep diving into them as well, and we do it for all the NFL teams. So if it involves players, teams, coaches, schemes, that's what we break down for you inside the film room. And we basically are your NFL-style scouting department for less than a magazine subscription. So check it out. We've got a lot of free information. We've got a podcast on Tuesday and Thursdays. A lot of free information up on posts that we have for you. But obviously the membership it gives you inside to the premium access information. And as Ryan mentioned, we're taking 50%, and we're donating it to the flood victims in Texas and in Florida.